Welcome everybody to the show. Tonight we're talking.
Go ahead.
Tonight we're talking about the Charles S. Roberts Awards again, and then the idea tonight is we would like to talk about kind of some of the struggles that have happened over the last couple of years that I think we've all seen and heard the commentary about. And then we want to maybe get some public feedback on, how we can make things better. Now, there's a lot of ideas floating around. We wrote a lot of stuff down. That conversation has started. But, we haven't made decisions yet. We're going to have to, we're going to do this and approach this in an organized way. It's not going to be just, well, Gary says it's going to be this way, so it's going to be this way. I don't want to do it that way. I want to be able to count on other folks to have input and have ideas that I didn't have. So I actually posted this on the Facebook group. I'll point out to everybody that the notes, the video description includes now links to the Charles S. Roberts Awards Twitter account and Facebook discussion group where we can talk about this stuff. And the webpage is coming hopefully real soon now. So the new webpage, the old webpage, you could basically might go away at any time. Let me put it that way.
Hey, the reason why I'm laughing is because the comments. These people are crazy. I swear to God, it's and you know what? I don't know if I forgot to tell you, but I wanted to have Stigler on and talk about his game, but we'll do that next week if you're okay.
Sure. That sounds great. No, that sounds great.
Okay, so Stigler, you're on next week. Don't piss me off. That's what it is.
It's easy. It's easy to piss him off. So if folks have things that they thought were wrong about the last 2 years of Charles S. Roberts Awards, put them in the chat so that we have some, so we can kind of start the discussion.
And you know what? Since any criticism to a grown human being, to a person who has grown into themselves, can accept the criticism and use it positively, now's the time. Do it, say it.
These are. Yes, be constructive about it. Don't be a dick about it. But these are process problems, right? This is not so-and-so is a numbskull, right?
Who cares?
We want to fix the process so it's sustainable, and so I don't have to manually run this fucking thing for the next 15 years. So
just demonetize yourself.
So it's okay. I think we're 5 minutes in. We're 3 minutes in. That could be a problem. We may be demonetized tonight. It is all okay. So I actually didn't put in a nominating ballot. I don't know if Dan did or not.
No, I haven't.
I actually do whether he did or not, because I was the person that went through the ballots. One of the people that went through the ballots. But I didn't, because at the time it was like, you know what? I think there's such huge problems that I don't want to be involved. So I did not submit a nominating ballot. I will submit a final ballot. The folks involved are expected to submit ballots if they feel like submitting ballots. Those are just other votes, right? Our votes don't count any more than anybody else's do. And I can also say I've recused myself from being nominated in the one category where I could have conceivably been nominated. So there's I guess. Go ahead.
What?
Go ahead.
I got two things I want to say. Andy Hoffman, don't use BGG for anything. Andy, I understand what you're saying, but at least JPEGs are good for that. And also, Doug Sunset, way too many notes. I mean categories. I understand.
Yes, and that's not wrong. And we'll maybe talk about that a little bit. To touch on Andy's point, BGG is an invaluable resource. However, you cannot count on it for publication dates, especially in the last few years. So to answer John Clark's question, let me first make the announcement about the announcement, which is that we expect, if all goes well, to be able to make the announcements of the nominations on Dan's show Saturday morning. Right, Dan?
It's happening. I'm telling you what's happening.
Okay. So we have the nominee list, the press release is ready to go as of literally half an hour ago. All that's is set up. We're going to queue up, and the final ballots should go live at more or less the same time. So by Saturday, you should be able to submit your final ballots to choose from among the nominees for the Charles S. Roberts Awards. So John Clark is asking, how have we determined to identify publication dates? So in some cases, we, such and such a game, I cannot give you any information about that tonight, about what got nominated. I hopefully won't blow it. That could happen. So we did a bunch of different stuff, right? We had several people involved in that discussion, and we were able to say in some cases, okay, I know that this game came out this year because I can look at the invoice. I know when it shipped to me, and if it was in the middle of the year and I had it on pre-order, well, I'm okay. And we were able to identify a lot, but not all of the nominees using that method because we personally had personal knowledge that this game came out in 2021. We did look at every game on BGG to see when BGG had said it come out. And there were cases where BGG said it was 2020 and it was actually 2021. And cases where BGG said it was 2021 and it was actually 2022.
So who inputs that information? Is it like Wikipedia or something?
Well, so a lot of times it's the publishers, and if the publishers, this is what well, I don't want to talk about that. So a lot of times it's the publishers, and it's the expected publication date, and then everything was late, right? Because this is the reality of the hobby that we're in, right? So Carl says, can we make the ballots easier? So let me answer the question by first saying what we kind of want to do at a very high level. Okay, we want to increase transparency. We want to make knowledge of what we're doing and how we're doing it available to the people who vote. Right. For one thing, because we would like the feedback. Right. If we're doing something stupid, I want to hear about it so we can fix that, rather than having everything take place behind this curtain. And then a set of nominees shows up, and half the stuff didn't come out in that year, half the stuff doesn't belong in not half, but a significant, a non-trivial number of nominees should not have been nominees because they weren't published in that year, or they don't fit in the category, or a number of other reasons, right? It wasn't most, it was a handful, but that handful undermines the credibility of the entire process. So one of the things that we will need to do is to get the core mission right? The core mission is to recognize excellence in conflict simulation games. Okay. And if that means that we can also recognize excellence in YouTube channels or historical analysis or whatever, that's great. But we got to get the core mission right first. So expect to see now. Also, I took over kind of halfway through the nominations process, right? Well, we're more than halfway based on the calendar, but in fact, it was pretty much halfway, a little less than halfway, to be honest, in terms of process. So we felt, I said right off the top, look, we can't make any changes to the process. We got to roll with, for 2021, it's like a third done. We've got to complete that process as originally intended, right? We didn't make any category changes. We didn't drop anything. We worked with the data that we had from the nominating ballots. One of the things that we are probably going to do is establish some kind of upfront process for determining eligibility. We'll see what that actually looks like. At the end of the day, while I don't want to go into specifics because we haven't made this decision as to specifically how this is going to work, yes, to answer Carl's question or suggestion, the ballots next time should be substantially easier to deal with. Now, there are 24 categories this year, right? So that's a lot of check boxes. But it's going to be that simple. Is you're going to get a list, you're going to check the boxes, and you're going to hit submit at the bottom. It's not that hard. And if you want to do extra legwork on the games, that's up to you. So yeah, there you go. I have no idea how that's even affected. I mean, go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, no, I was looking at Andrew just said Dan is the Italian Nick off Demar. Andrew, you're from Montreal, right? Right.
I have no idea who that might be.
That's right.
So there is an award this year for, I'll read you the category because this is on the old website, so this is not privileged information. Best game review or analysis website, webcast, or podcast, right? So there is an award for this, right? I said in 2019, I don't think there should be an award for this. So we'll see what happens. But again, I'm going to say we need to get the core mission right before we start to give out recognition to sort of the things that connect to that core of conflict simulation games. Games are issued an ISBN, but that doesn't necessarily reflect actual publication date. And how do we define that? So this is a question that we had come up, right? How are we defining that? Are we defining that by the publisher says it released in 2021? I'm using 2021 as the example here. So therefore it released in 2021. And we had to do that in some cases. We actually had to reach out to publishers. And a couple publishers did get back to us. I ended up personally reaching out to designers of my acquaintance and asking them directly, hey, did this thing come out in 2021? And in those cases, I was pretty sure that the answer was yes, but I wanted verification so we could say so-and-so says that this came out in 2021. So in any case, if there's questions about eligibility, somebody's got to make those decisions, but we also need clear guidelines. Like one of the things that we've talked about is reprints, right? We're seeing a lot of reprints, not necessarily reprints, but new editions of older games, right? There's a lot of these floating around. Sometimes they're like completely new games, and sometimes they are errata corrected fourth printings, right? What is eligible and what is not? We need to have a guideline for that, or a rule for that, if you like, and then there'll need to be a decision-making process in edge cases. In terms of publication date, if we say, you know, so-and-so was published in 2022 and not 2021, well, at least they're eligible next year. If the game was that good, it should show through, right? Oh,
Artie,
I'm sure we'll give Dan a medal for something. I don't know what it'll be.
Well, no, I want to talk about recusing me. I want to ask the chat, and in all honesty, I'm not on the board, though I'm involved because I get the information from the CSRs because I got to put the show together, right? I need that. So I know all the information. Now, I was talking to Artie before, and I was saying, you know, I've been nominated in one category, and I just don't feel right about me doing a show and me being nominated. So general consensus, look, I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't feel right about it. I don't feel right about it. Is it right? Or should I just recuse myself?
Well, I'll give Dan my answer to this. And, you know, by all means, chat, pipe in on this. Dan is not on the board. Dan does not have policy-making power over the process. He can vote like anybody else can. I'm gonna vote in the final ballot. At least a couple of members of the board are definitely going to vote on the final ballot, and I think that's fine. We get the same voice as everybody else. Our ballots do not count more than anybody else's. It's just another vote. And if I voted for something stupid and you know and I have something unpopular or whatever, and my vote doesn't win, oh well. Same thing with the nominations process, right? So I personally do not see, although Dan does have an early look at some of the information. I don't see where Dan has a conflict of interest because Dan does not have the ability to affect the process.
It just
at all, cheap. Other than maybe voting, right? So
it just feels cheap. It just feels like, you know, it's the boys club and I'm in. I never liked that.
I understand now, and in my case, I recused because I am involved in the process decisions. So there's a potential for appearance of conflict of interest there, and I don't think that should happen. So it's going to be easy, and as long as I'm doing this, I'm going to just recuse from nominations or awards. Okay. Somebody asked about should we have best map from Meandering Mike, best counters, best cards, best dice, best backup box. This is being looked at. The general category landscape is being looked at. I think there's reasons to think we should recognize presentation quality. The question is, do we need to do that with 6 different awards? That's a discussion that we should have. Stigler's got a question. If you don't vote on any category, does your ballot still count? He only feels qualified to vote in a few categories each year. So you can choose to not vote in any category, and the votes that you do submit do count. We tested this. I won't say we tested it to destruction, but we did test it. So we know how it is going to work, and we're confident that it is going to work. You will be required to put in things like an email address, so we could verify your votes if that's necessary. I don't imagine that's going to be necessary, but you never know. So Jason W says, what is the best place to go for CSR award info right now? That's going to be the website, which will be launching soon. We hope this week. There is a process. I don't want to call it a delay because we knew this was going to happen, but there's a domain transfer involved, and that could take a couple of days. So it could go up anytime. Basically, it could be up tomorrow. It could be up on Friday or Saturday morning. But once that happens, then the address will be at charlessrobertsawards.com. So, and we'll have to give thanks to Subbuddy for making that possible.
So you've been speaking to that somebody. How's it coming along?
That's fine. I'm not even sure now. I have no idea what we're talking about. But
the website. I thought you were talking about.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm in contact with the website person, and they have all the information that they need. We're ready basically to go. There's going to be a lot of room to make that website better moving forward. But right now, we really only need, here's the press release, the list of the nominees. Here's news about the CSR awards, and here's the ballot, and and then the charter and the bios of the folks involved. Expect that charter to change. I think it's safe to say at this point that there'll be a substantial charter revision for 2022, and we're gonna be starting those formal discussions before the end of 2022, so that we can then hit the ground running in 2023 and not have an 11-month process to figure out who won the awards.
And concerning the website, Gary, will you have access to it to put in news monthly or weekly, like to update?
Yeah, so I don't want the web person to have to do that. So no. Yes, there will be there will be multiple people involved, probably board members, and probably a few other people actually who will have that access.
Okay. Wait, Fabrizio, come stai? È troppo tardi per te stasera.
Chet, maybe you shouldn't count me out of that just yet. Like I said, that's a discussion that's happened. Obviously, that discussion will have a very different complexion this year, but we are actually still planning to do that. So Andrew Frankie says you should recuse yourself.
I think he's right. And you know what? I don't feel bad. I don't feel good about it. And if I don't feel good about it, it's not a good thing. I'm not going to be happy winning or being nominated. So, Artie, I'm telling you right now, I'm recusing myself.
Now, Sisyphus here says don't recuse yourself.
Well, Sisyphus. He's Sisyphus. He's going up and down, up and down, up and down.
What does Charybdis say? That's Scylla and Charybdis, actually. Never mind. Roger says that he is unique, a category unto himself, because hey, look, that's true.
I understand. I appreciate all the good things that people say, but I know what I do. You guys know what I do. I get enough gratification by just being here and listening to that. It's good for me, man. Christ, I always hated the spotlight.
So, obviously. So
well, really?
I will say, Dan, if you're not comfortable not recusing yourself, then you should.
No,
I gave you my opinion. You ignored it, just like my wife. And you're going to do what you're going to do. But if you're more comfortable recusing yourself, then you should.
Yes,
but it's up to you. I am not going to advise you that you
no, because
I think you should.
As Alistair says, it's going to make a stink somehow, somewhere. They're going to the skeletons in the closet, hookers and blow. Anyway, you know what I mean? Hookers and blow.
And let me say something else too. I mean, don't assume that these 2020 awards nominees are going to get announced and there's going to be no controversy regarding those nominees. There are some nominations that I think people will take issue with, and they will have reasons for that, but we're obliged to keep the category definitions as they were, and we are 100% confident that as the categories are construed under the 2021 rules, that every game is in fact eligible in the category in which, or categories in which it was nominated.
I don't want to be part of any a conspiracy theory, this and that, or boys club. I don't want to have to justify myself. Screw it. I'm recusing myself. I'm saying it now. I'm recusing myself. Get me off the goddamn list.
The Hugo, well, fine, we'll take you off the list. So the Hugo Awards actually did like Best Fan Award. I think it was the Hugos for Best Fan Awards for a long time. Again, that's great, but I think we need to get the core mission right before we can seriously talk about and build credibility on that core mission. To make people think, to allow people to think that we are doing a good job recognizing excellence in conflict simulation games, rather than throwing awards here and awards there, and throwing awards to EW and other people who don't care that they were nominated for a Charles S. Roberts Award. Fabrizio Vianello. I just mispronounced your name. I realize that, but that's okay.
No, you didn't. You said it right.
No, it's Fabrizio.
It's Fabrizio. Bye, you can say Fabrizio. Come on, Fabrizio.
Oh, yeah, I can.
Relax,
I mean, I'm from Ohio. I can get away with saying a lot of things. Okay. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the show too. No nominations here. You should have that show after the awards are announced.
You know, the solo or co-op category should be called the Stigler category.
So this is a real good question. Okay. What about, so right now the category reads Best Solitaire. I'll read you the category. Best Solitaire or Cooperative War Game for war games designed to be played by one or more players in a cooperative mode or with a dedicated solitaire experience. I think that definition is problematic, because a game like Empire of the Sun qualifies. Right now, it was released in like 1995, but it qualifies, right? It's not a solitaire game, but it has a solitaire mode. There's a bot in it, right? Every coin game qualifies according to this.
Yeah.
So should the solitaire, and so many games now are either solitaire games or are capable of being solitaire because they have some explicit mechanic for it, whether it's a bot or flowchart or deck of cards or whatever it is. Are we diluting that category by allowing both types of games in, right? Now, I certainly think that people could consider solitairability one of the criteria that they use that determines what their votes are going to be. That's no problem. Stigler says, keep it about the games. ASL has a solitaire mode. There's a whole solitaire box, right?
Yeah, but isn't it just exclusive to those scenarios?
Kind of, yeah. But
yeah.
I mean, you can also just a solitaire, right? I mean, I guess the fine point here is it a solitaire game that maybe you could play multiplayer like Peloponnesian War, or is it a multiplayer game that maybe you could play solitaire like Empire of the Sun, right? And I'm picking on Mark Herman here on purpose because he's won plenty of these. So yeah, but what the point is, not to necessarily highlight this particular problem, but to say that the categories and their definitions need fine tuning, right? So, for example, Best World War II game, right? At some point, there's going to, unless we say, hey, Sino-Japanese War is a second Sino-Japanese War is included, or Spanish Civil War is included. We need to figure out where those games go, because right now the process is that anybody can nominate anything they want in any category that they like, whether it's the correct category or not. And we did see games that ended up missing out on a nomination because votes for those games were split between two categories, and they fit in both categories because the category definitions were not specific enough.
Well, should they be nominated in both categories then?
No, and they weren't. They didn't get enough votes to get nominated in either category. But if all their votes had been in one category, they would have been nominated. There was one example that and maybe more, but I could think of one example that happened in. And there's also categories where you have categories that are governed by obscure historical fact. And this one I can't get into detail, but like a category that is defined in such a way that a game will fit in one category unless you know the obscure historical fact, in which case it fits into a different category. And actually, that's the example that particular game that missed out, because some people knew obscure historical fact number 72, and some people didn't. Some people put it in one category, and some people put it in another category. And if they'd all voted for it in one of those two, it would have gotten a nomination. So, I do feel like there is. Let me say this. I have already said that there will be nominations that are controversial and people will argue about, and I'm completely okay with that. That's completely normal. He's on a Doc Cummins got a restraining order against Stigler from driving down from Oregon to burn down the Decision Games warehouse. He is one of the secret investors in Decision Games, I believe, is where we're going with this. So I'm very pleased, even proud of the fact that I think the nominees that we have are all excellent games. They all fit in their categories. They were all released in 2021. I think ultimately, when you look at the nominees and you look at the way the categories are confined for awards year 2021, I think it's pretty close to airtight, actually.
How much tweaking was involved in the list that you got, Artie?
Well, so if you're asking, did we have to make decisions?
Yeah.
Then the answer is yeah, because it was the original ballot. I'll flatly say that the way the nominating ballots worked in previous years is unworkable and has to go. They're open text fields, so anybody can put whatever they want. So there were cases where somebody put a game in whose title has a funny character, a non-standard character, and then when we got the CSV file, it would get mangled, and sometimes I could work out what the ASCII was supposed to be, and sometimes I couldn't. And those votes were we couldn't do anything with those votes. We got 2 votes for Labatai. That was the vote, Labatai. Unfortunately, there are 2 games called Labatai that were released in 2021, and one of them is in the Labatai system, and the other one is in a different Labatai system by a different designer, completely unrelated, other than having Labatai in the title. Which games were those referring to? I don't know. So, we did have to make decisions. We also meticulously recorded every time we had to make one of those decisions. And then we bounced that record back and forth to make sure that our decisions made sense. So ultimately, if there were, if I don't anticipate this feedback, but if somebody got left out, and the only one I feel bad about really is the one that the one nominee, I think there actually might have been 2 of these where their votes got split between 2 categories, and it was a real shame that we couldn't give that game a nomination, but it was in one category and not 2, so that was why. There were other instances where I'm trying to think of. I could pull up the giant spreadsheet with hundreds of line items of problems that we had. What we tried to do with the ballots was to recognize the games that people thought represented excellence in war games. And we also wanted to invalidate as few voter votes as possible, right? So we saw this in a number of places where somebody would submit a World War II game, but they'd put it in the Napoleonic category for whatever reason. But where that person had an open nominating slot in World War II, we moved it there. In the name of retaining that voter's wishes about what games they felt were excellent for that year. And there were a number of situations where we did that. This is absolutely true, of course. It does just mean the battle. So
yeah. Artie, I just had an idea. I don't know if it's a good one, but why don't we have, when the CSR webpage is up, companies that put out their new games of that year, they want to be nominated, this and this and that, and whatever I'm saying.
Let me get to that. That is a thing.
CSR website. You know what I mean?
That is the thing that we talked about. So Agre Day asks, is there a press seal publishers can use on future games? Yes, there is, actually. I had Roger work one up for 2021. So we'll make that available to the winners. So if anybody wants to use it, they used to make stickers that they would stick on the boxes, and the CSR awards have a budget insufficient to print their own stickers. But if a publisher wants to say, "Hey, this award is game is a CSR award winner. Here's the symbol. Go ahead." I'm sure Roger would be totally fine with that.
What does William Byrd say? Might be wise to have a nominating committee. What does he mean by that exactly?
Yeah, so this is also one of the options. So two of the things that have just been mentioned here is William Byrd mentions nominating committee, and somebody, maybe it was you, mentioned the idea of having the publishers put games in for nomination. We reach out in second week of January. We send emails out to every publisher we could find and say, "Hey, we're the Charles S. Roberts Awards. We are accepting submissions for nomination for the 2022 awards. Please give us a list of games that you feel are award worthy that were released in calendar year 2021." Okay, well, we could do that. This is how Hollywood does it. Like, the studio submits the award for the Academy Awards. They put it in for consideration. And there have been cases where actors have gotten bent because they thought their performance was awesome, and it probably was, and the studio didn't submit the movie for consideration. The problem with this method is it is going to end up being, and we may do it anyway, but it is actually going to end up being a bit of a pain in the ass to manage, because somebody's got to send out all those emails. Somebody's got to keep track of all the contact information for publishers. And we can't just send that email to GMT, Compass, MMP, Legion War Games, Revolution Games, and Worthington, right? We got to make sure that everybody, if we're going to do that, we have to make sure that every publisher gets that email. That includes all the publishers in Europe that there's 30 wargame publishers in Europe. I can name like 4 of them, right? So that's one reason why it's important to have people like Ricardo, who's in Europe, other people who are in Asia who can help us with that, right?
I mean, Consum World has a big database of a lot of publishers on the Consum World website.
It is far from complete.
Hey, that's a lot.
It is far from complete. And some of those publishers probably aren't in business anymore. This is the other thing, is that, I send emails to publishers, not that regularly, but every once in a while. And I have about a 1/3 response rate, to be honest about it. And I'm not going to say who responds and who doesn't. But some companies had things I gave away in October 2022, and some didn't. So you could probably not have to think all that hard to figure it out. So, and there is an actual thing in the Charles S. Roberts Awards where, when Charlie Roberts agreed to give his name to the awards, he wanted the awards to be free of conflicts of interest with commercial interests. Okay. So that doesn't mean we can never talk to a publisher or designer, right? But it does mean that we have to be careful if we do, to ensure that there is no potential conflict of interest there. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be a big pain, and there was some efforts made to do this for last year, and I don't know where that initiative went, but I do know where it went. It went nowhere. And I don't know why. I don't know the details, but I can absolutely see that it must have been an absolute bitch
it must be incredible. That's why I'm saying the Consum World at least helps out with at least a 1/10 of what we have. When I say we, of what the board has to do to find new publishers.
I mean, I've got a personal list of game publishers that has more publishers on it than the list of forums on Consum World. So that's just me, because I run a YouTube channel and I want to know who's who. So another thing that I'll mention is that there is ample precedent in the history of the Charles S. Roberts Awards. If you look for what the awards were given for in 1974, in 1984, and 1994, you will see that there is ample precedent for the categories changing. I think we should try to stabilize that, but that means that we have to have really good categories and really good category definitions so that games won't necessarily fall out of the cracks. And this is true. I mentioned this. That Consum World list has a lot of companies that don't exist anymore. So,
I mean,
don't forget to thumbs up the video, by the way, folks. If I didn't mention that before.
Fabrizio's games, they were nominated. Thin Red Line was nominated last year.
You're not supposed to tell anybody any of this.
No,
Dan.
last year.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Yeah, so okay.
Hold on. Yeah, last year, Deadly Northern Lights got nominated for Modern Hypothetical. This might not have been last year. This might have been the year before. Yeah, it's impossible to tell on this website. So we're going to be working on that too. I do want to. I mean, the website's going to be pretty bare bones when it launches, to be frank, because we need to get it going. And then we can start building it with a history page and here's the people in the Hall of Fame and little bios and pictures of the games that won in previous years and all that stuff. We'd like to do all of that. That's all things that are going to happen after the end of 2022. So. Yeah, and some publishers only release a game every few years. New England Simulations, for example.
Well, that's what it is, man. And we have, when I say we, the board has to make that website available, like socially available in lots of places.
Yeah, and that comes back to transparency. We need to make sure that people understand how the process is going to work. Now, our ability to do that for 2021 is a little bit limited for a variety of logistical reasons. But once we have a new charter in place, that will, or an amended charter, if you like, that actually takes the time to describe the process and not just says, well, the board determines, then I think the process will be a lot more transparent. And we want to have open forums like this. I mean, that's why I ended up going with a Facebook group for a couple of reasons. One, when I stopped doing this, I could transfer control of the Facebook group to somebody else. You could do that with a page, but it's a pain. And two, we actually want people to talk about this, right? We want to get feedback because people will have good ideas. Somebody just wrote me, I don't want to mention their name, but it's a longtime viewer who is like not registered with Facebook or Google or any of that, so they can't even thumbs the video up, who wrote me like this extended essay about what's wrong with the way it's been running and what they would do to fix it, its category suggestions and all this other stuff. And there's some great ideas in there, many of which I had already had, but a couple of which I have, because we've been talking about this now for about a week, about how we really want to handle this moving forward. So right now we're in a discussion phase. We're going to figure out what we want to do, and then we'll put an actual proposal together, and then the board will vote on it. That's the plan.
You don't want to have a what do you call those? You just said it. Oh my God! You don't want to have a
committee
forum on the CSR website.
No, I don't. I'm happy to let Facebook do that, actually.
Yeah.
Forums, independent forums are a pain in the ass to manage.
Absolutely.
The group on Facebook can be a big headache too, but right now it's fine. We're probably going to need a volunteer moderator or two to take care of that. And I will mention, as Frank points out, 24 is a lot of categories. The 2021 has 24 categories. I want to say, I'm not going back and counting them, so I'm doing this from memory. I want to say in 2020, there were, I think, 32 or 34 categories. So the decision was made at some point that said, hey, we have so many categories that this is really hard to run. Let's add 8 new categories. Some of which weren't for war, a lot of which, in fact, weren't for war games, right? Weren't for tabletop games. A lot of these things I'd like to see recognized, but I'm also happy to let other awards recognize them, right?
Well, yeah, 12 categories I don't think is enough.
I have, this is not a decision. This is a work in progress of my draft of what I think we can make it work and how we can tweak the definitions and all that. I don't think we can realistically get it to less than 15 or 15 or 16.
Oh, 15. I thought you said 50.
50 would be really, so if in 5 years we have this process down to a science and we got people who are participating and engaged and everything's working great, maybe we'll have 35 categories. I don't have a problem with that, but again, we got to get the core mission right of recognizing excellence in conflict simulation
Yes.
before we start trying to do other stuff,
Yes.
right?
Like
Even if
podcasting.
you and I, Dan, do the other stuff, right? I said in
Exactly.
2019 for the best website or whatever it was called at the time, I said the Charles S. Roberts Awards should give an award for this. Somebody else should do this. And I'd like to see somebody do that. The Caesar Awards are actually doing that, but they're aimed more at miniatures. You're doing that with your Grog of the Year, actually. So,
it's coming up, Grog of the Year, by the way.
You could delay it till like 2026. That's fine. I'd be fine with that. I disagree with you, Stigler. There is some fat, but the fat's not where you're looking is probably not where the fat is. Where you're looking is where the fine tuning needs to happen. There is fat that needs to be that I think we're going to end up cutting. Now, again, it's not going to be me making this decision. We're going to talk about it. We're going to have a month to talk about it. And then we're going to put a proposal together and vote on, or a set of proposals, however that works out. So I will say this. There is so much precedent for periodized categories that I don't think we should try to drop the periodized categories. Now, the categories also, somebody suggested, well, you should have a category for between the world wars. And I'm like, okay. I mean, this is actually a period. So you're talking like 1919 to 1939, right? This is a period I'm interested in. There's very few games that come out that are set in this period. Okay. There's every so often you'll see a Spanish Civil War game or a Russian Revolution game. And every so often you'll see some unrelated conflict. Vanishingly few games are deal with this period. So the categories have to reflect stuff that's actually coming out too, right? So this is why I think there's justification for lumping ancients and medieval games together, because they're both pre-gunpowder, and because there's really not that many medieval games that release every year either. And we don't want to find ourselves in a position where a category is so lean that we have 5 nominees and 3 of them are shitty, because there just wasn't that much for us to pick from. We don't want to be in that position. So we need to keep those categories tight. World War II is not a problem. You could easily have 3 different World War II categories. I'm not advocating that, but you could, based strictly on volumes of games.
Stigler, I'm gonna punch you in the face, Stigler. Tim Zales, yes, the daughter is still involved, and I think she will be involved for a long time. She's actually super honored and super proud that this is
so I've had a fair amount of interaction with Joanne at this point. So that Joanne Roberts is Charlie Roberts' daughter. And she kind of was not a war gamer. She didn't know much about what was going on until she found out sometime last year. She is incredibly engaged. She doesn't really know much about wargaming, but that's okay. She's incredibly engaged with this process and on maintaining and building upon Charlie Roberts' legacy. So frankly, I think Joanne is the most valuable board member in a lot.
Absolutely.
So yeah, she's still involved. And I hope she stays involved absolutely permanently. So
look, listen to what Fabrizio says. Droppable, best early gunpowder, best late gunpowder. Troppo categorie, troppo giochi. Too many games. Too many games.
So how do you define these categories, right? I mean, early gunpowder. So you can't just say early gunpowder. And this is how I'll read you the current definition. And has led to problems that I can't talk about. Current definition of early gunpowder is war games set between 1453 and 1793. Okay, what if the game is set in a date in that range but doesn't have gunpowder in it? Is it an early gunpowder game? Maybe it is. Maybe you say that it is, but maybe you say that it isn't. You have to then make an ad hoc decision on the spot for that particular game. And there's way too many examples of games where this kind of thing happened. You can't just go by dates. World War II, even World War II, you can't. Do you include the Spanish Civil War in World War II? Because right now the category definition says yes.
That's a good one.
Do you include the Second Sino-Japanese War? I say yes. I think that's completely reasonable, and to argue otherwise, I think it's fairly indefensible. But there are people who will argue that World War II is 1939 to 1945. This game about the Marco Polo Bridge incident is not in that period, so therefore it's in another category. And that, I mean, so you can't just go by dates, right? It'd be cool if you could, but it's tough, right? There's other categories where there's kind of a mishmash of things kind of put together. The current modern category is one of those games set after World War II, during the Cold War, or hypothetical conflicts after World War II. And I wish I could tell you what the nominees were right now, because you will find that some of those subfields inside that category are better represented than others.
Andrew Aitken, maybe for simplicity's sake, we use dates. That was one of my concerns. Why don't we just use dates, Artie? Sorry?
I've just explained why we can't use dates.
There you go.
So you got to give, I mean, you can use dates as a starting point, but then you have to give more information. There's going to be overlap, right? Particularly between like late gunpowder and early gunpowder and Napoleonic Wars. Is the War of 1812 a Napoleonic topic? This came up in 2019 or 2020, right? I think it was Dawn's Early Light got either a nomination or maybe even won as in the Napoleonics category. And is it a Napoleonic game? It's the War of 1812 in North America, right? No, Napoleon doesn't show up. At no point do the French invade or anything like that. It's strictly a thing. And I realize it has impact on the Napoleonic Wars, but this is a question that you have to be prepared to answer either in the category definitions this is never going to be perfect, right? So, or you have to then have somebody making that call. This game fits into this category. Here's why, right?
Stigler, I agree with you 100%. And Fabrizio, hai ragione. Grazie.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, right? World War II was going on for years in Asia before
that's right.
Before the Poles got involved, right? This is true too. Yeah, Native American Wars. What if you have a pre-Columbian Native American
I get it
game?
now.
I'm not sure I could think. I'm pretty sure there's at least a couple examples. Where do you fit that, right? Do you call it this is so the sort of the topic of wargame periodization is actually a pretty tough topic to completely get your hands around. Even just as a bozo like me making a spreadsheet to keep track of the shit that I got, I had to kind of I spent a lot of time figuring that out. When does the Middle Ages end? Scholars do not agree on that. Whoever set the categories up decided that the Middle Ages ended in 1453 with the sack of Constantinople. But other people will say that the Middle Ages ended in 1492 with the discovery of the New World by Columbus. Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp, thank you so much for the support. It is much appreciated. Why not wait? Still you what games qualify and then make categories that fit them. Okay, so I don't think this is a workable solution, but it is actually a fairly interesting idea. If you do that, then your categories are essentially not meaningful, right? I think you want to have stability in the categories. I think there should always be a Napoleonic category and a World War II category and an American Civil War category, for example. And honestly, you're kind of fitting all the other periodized categories around that. And thus the current definition of late gunpowder, which is war games set after 1793 up to World War I, excluding the American Civil War and the Napoleonic Wars involving Napoleon or one of his marshals. Boy, what a definition, right? I see why it's like that, but that's not a workable or useful definition. There are also Napoleonic topics that don't include Napoleon or one of his marshals, right? So you got to kind of figure out where those other things go. And I think the idea of having like, here's a gunpowder period, but then we exclude American Civil War and Napoleonics, I think that's actually fine by itself. But then you have to say, okay, here's a game about Reconstruction. Now, I'm not aware of a game about this that I'd call a war game, but the topic could come up. And where do we fit that? Is that an American Civil War game? Right, because it's direct aftermath of the American Civil War. Right.
Stigler, go to Stigler's comment, please. If I swear, if I was there, if I was there. But I understand. I understand what he's saying.
I understand what he's saying, and I kind of agree with him. But at the same time, we got to work with what we have to work with too, right?
I swear that guy gives us more work for nothing. Just like Carl. Carl, you want to give us more work? Shut up.
So we may have a category. Nobody's got a whole paragraph, right? None of these have a whole paragraph right now, but some of them need more than they've got, right? There are absolutely categories that I think could be added, frankly, that I think where we won't see them in 2022, maybe. But I think there's room to add categories, right? There's some interesting things that I think represent a big enough set of published games in any given year that could get their own categories that don't readily tie in elsewhere. I guess I'll tell you, hypothetical games. There's a lot of hypothetical games. There's probably more hypothetical games now. I mean, the Thai Bomba industry for it by itself is responsible for half a dozen hypothetical games every year, right? So, if not more than that. So, should, and I'm not saying I think we should do that. I'm saying we should talk about that and make a determination of whether it's feasible or not. Should that be its own category? Maybe it should, right?
Fabrizio, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, okay. Yeah, coffee here has gone crazy. De fa nervoso, 3 ingredients at the most, and even I take my coffee black, nero e solamente nero. Affanculo tutti gli altri.
I just want coffee, man. That's all. This is an interesting idea, and I don't know that we're seriously considering that at this time. However, I think this is a really interesting idea that I think we will have a discussion about at some point. Of trying to recognize games in distinct mechanical categories as well. On the other hand, recognize also that there are several other awards floating around now. We have the Historical Board Game Awards, which have just been announced, in which I'm on their voting committee. And they're giving out like 3 awards, but they are for historical board games, right? The Charles S. Roberts Awards, it's right in the charter. It's been there forever. Excellence in conflict simulations. Okay. I think that's important in this case and will help us kind of draw a clear dividing line between a different type of awards, like the Historical Board Game Awards, and awards like the Zenobia Award and the Summit Award and the Caesars and all the other awards. There's room for everybody. Somebody actually asked this on BGG. Why are you having no awards? The CSRs are great. But I felt like that was, and I ended up answering it because I'm like, look, I think it's fine. I'm every field that's thriving has multiple awards. That's not really a problem. Those awards recognize different things. They have different emphases that they put out.
Meandering Mike, I don't like sliding Korean War into World War II era. I understand. Artie, would it be? It is an offspring of World War II, but is it the beginning of the Cold War? Would you?
Well, the Cold War is an offshoot of World War II, right?
Obviously, but where do you draw the line?
Well, it's a great question, right? Are there enough? So let's say you have a Cold War category, right? This is part of the calculus you have to think about. So Cold War runs from say 1945 or 46 or whatever you decide to 1989 or 1995 right. Or whenever the coup happened in the Soviet Union. Are there enough games published every year to support that category? Right, because if there's only 5 games published that year, then one of them's gonna be crappy, right? And you're gonna end up with a crappy nominee, and you're gonna have to deal with that. Then maybe you only have 3 nominees because just two of the 5 games that released were crappy. So you got to think about how well can you support, how sustainable is this category, right? That's the same problem with the interwar period. I mean, the game about that period comes out once every few years. There's simply not enough volume in that category to support an award for that category. On the other hand, we can reliably assume that there will be sufficient numbers of excellent World War II games, excellent Napoleonic games, excellent American Civil War games, and excellent Ancients games to support a great pool of winners. I think or nominees, and only one of them is going to be a winner, right? But such that you wouldn't be ashamed or offended if any one of those excellent games won. I think the tougher question is not World War II versus Korean War, which you could easily lump into a Cold War category if you felt that was supportable. But with medieval games, that's kind of what I'm most interested in looking at. Are there enough medieval games released, and where do you draw the line there? Right? Where do you say antiquity ends and the Middle Ages begins? Do you say, as I do, as somebody who did work on this in school, that the Middle Ages start on Christmas Day, 800 AD? Because that's what I would say, right? Or do you say that the Middle Age, is there a Dark Age period, right? And if there's a Dark Age period, do you lump that in with the Middle Ages, or do you lump it in with antiquity? Historians nowadays, traditionally, it's been more considered closer to medieval period. But now historians are actually calling that period that we used to call the Dark Ages late antiquity, and would include stuff like the Byzantine period, the quote unquote Byzantine period, Eastern Roman Empire, that whole thing. So the point isn't that I'm trying to say we should put this particular topic in one category or put it in the other. It's that those are decisions that we have to make, right? Whether we decide that, to take John's example here, whether Spanish Civil War is part of World War II from a category standpoint, or whether it isn't.
Look, the Germans.
The current category definition says that it is. By the way, I'm not saying that's right, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that at least is clear, because I think we had somebody voted for a Spanish Civil War game. William Aarons, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Are there categories for best written? Yes and no. Best written rule book and best map design. The answer is actually no.
What are you talking
categories, about? The categories that we have don't say best written rule book or best map design. They say best wargame map graphics for the graphical and physical presentation of a wargame's playing surface or board.
I think
doesn't
that's
say anything about it. Well, maybe, but it doesn't say that, right? It doesn't say well designed or clear or anything like that. The rules are exactly the same situation for the complete presentation of a wargame's rules.
He's that Canadian. Doesn't include. He's sorry for the semantics.
That doesn't include just writing. It also includes layout and editing and examples and illustrations, none of which are writing, right? So actually, in this case, I think that William's map category here is better than the existing category, but his rulebook category is worse than the existing category. Both those categories need to be fine. Well, something needs to happen to clarify what those categories are supposed to represent.
Semantics.
And then we have a best playing components, except the map, the rules, or the box, which is a really weird category. Best components other than the map, the rules, or the box. That's weird. I think that's a weird category, right?
Yeah, that category.
Another thing is we don't want to hem in designer creativity because the Charles S. Roberts Award says that your game has to fit into one of these categories. There are creative designers are going to come up with off the wall stuff that don't cleanly fit into our existing categories. That is going to happen, and that's okay. But there has to be a process to deal with it when it happens, right? That could be as simple as we have a nominating committee, and the nominating committee makes those decisions, right? It could be as we conduct this review process, we talk to the designer, whatever. The point is there needs to be a process, and we need to be transparent about that process. I'm really glad we did this tonight, actually, and we promise not to do this next week. By the way,
Artie Stigler says something. It's very funny. He says that the category, now I want to ask you something.
He's right.
Should there be an air of lightness in the CSR awards sometimes, with a little bit of comedy sometimes? That's funny. That's funny. You have a category for errata, best errata.
I have a little bit of a mixed feeling about this. I think this is a legitimate question. By the way. So, well, that's the question, right? Is I think I'd like to kind of have an air of solemnity to the whole thing,
I
but
understand.
then if you take that too far, and too far is not all that far, then it's boring, right? So from like like a presenting the announcement award show, I go nuts. I mean, that's fine. But it is as Christopher Press points out, it is a slippery slope, right? I think we kind of want to walk a line there. Of generally, we're very serious, but here's all this funny stuff too. So
Can we have an addendum at the end of the video?
like
Bloopers.
errata.
Bloopers.
Oh, that might be funny. I could have sent you my bloopers from the audio clips I sent you today, actually. So, because there were I didn't save the bloopers, but there were in fact. God damn it! So
Yeah, I just
the Red Stapler Award. We actually do have some ideas for new awards too. I mentioned one of them already. There's a couple other ideas that I think are really good ideas and that we'd like to make them work. But again, core mission comes first. We got to get the core mission and the processes working correctly and efficiently. And so it doesn't take 11 months to do the awards. And that's not, by the way, let me say this too. I think a lot of folks, Dan, I know you purposely kind of took the heat for the delay of last 2020's CSR awards.
Yeah,
I think we can say that maybe not all that delay was Dan's fault.
Okay? Well, I don't remember.
So, well, I do. People complain to you about, hey, where are the awards? What's going on here, Dan?
No, they didn't complain. They were just commenting. There was no malice.
I know. Well, there may have not have been malice, but I'm just saying you took a little bit of heat for that, and maybe there's other factors involved. So let's one of the goals is to make sure that people know what the hell's going on, right? Hey, we hit a delay. Sorry, we're going to be a month late, right?
Look, you and I and a lot of the people know how much work goes into this. For all the cash that we make, it's unbelievable the amount of work that we put in. And you know what? The people
are you the bloppers? Are you the bloppers?
Kilroy, I swear to God.
He's gonna come down there and punch you right in the knee.
I'm just saying, the people that know how much work goes into that have done work on YouTube, have edited, have done music. They know what the hell is going on. I don't have to justify for nothing.
And neither do
you. Neither do you, as a matter of fact.
Well, yeah, but I don't have to take that. There's a little button.
I ain't taking it. I'm just reading and saying, that's it. So, I'm not taking it. Come on.
So anyway, there's been actually a lot of good feedback here tonight. So I think we probably will do this again, but possibly not until after the awards are actually announced.
Right. Let's do a confirmation. Stigler on next week. We're going to talk about his game. Stigler, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're uptight and monotone, it ain't going to happen. I'm going to bring you out of your shell, my friend, because you got a big mouth on the comments. And when you're on live, you're enough of that shit.
We're gonna ask him. I'm gonna prepare a series of questions about how much he loves decision games.
Yeah, and you better be prepared to answer solo question games.
What's your favorite decision game, Stigler?
On your game.
What do you think is decision game's greatest success to date? It's gonna be glorious.
And what's great about this, and it's gonna sound cliche, it's
where were you on the night of November 3rd,
we're all a big family. It's a nice family. Yeah, we're dysfunctional, and there's some assholes,
slightly,
just like any family. All right.
So this is actually a good point. There were cases where the current charter is written in such a way that it says that there's supposed to be 5 nominees maximum. So in cases where there was like a tie for 5th place, we went with 4 nominees, except in one case where I felt like we could justify making the exception. And you'll see that when the announcement happens. And I think in some cases we had only 3 nominees because there'd be like a 6-way tie for 4th place. So it's like nobody felt strongly enough about it. There's a big gap between 3 and 4. So we went with 3 nominees for a lot of categories. But I don't think anybody will be upset by the categories in which that occurred. Let me put it that way. Particularly. So, all right, folks, we have had a great night here. I would like to thank everybody for watching. Don't forget to thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, all that jazz. Everybody have a great rest of the night. We'll be on Dan's channel next week. And don't forget,
Stigler.
And don't forget that the announcements of the nominees for the 2021 Charles S. Roberts Awards and the announcement of where to go to put in your final ballot will occur on next Saturdays, this coming Saturday at 12:01 a.m. or whatever Dan does.
And you know what? Can I say something? If you're going to watch my show and you're not subscribed, just subscribe. Press the button.
You don't know what
the hell is going on
with your personal juices. So I'm just saying.
Look, I recuse.
Do you trust Google? Because I don't trust Google at this point. Or Facebook.
Well, who else are you going to trust? Who's bigger than Google?
The phone company.
Which is owned by Google.
Yeah, well, kind of, yeah. I'm making a WKRP in Cincinnati reference now. So that means it's time to go, folks. So next week, my show set Monday, Dan's show Tuesday, and then Saturday, don't forget to watch the No Enemies Here broadcast. And we'll all watch in horror as Dan says the wrong things again and goes full Dan. All right, everybody have a great night.